Hello, this is Lisa LaRose here on Connect to Love on PRNFM, and I'm joined by the inspiring, ever-inspiring Michael J. Russ. I want to welcome you, Michael, and wrap a virtual hug around you and just say I'm so glad you're here.
We do that every day. We give virtual hugs over the DM. It's wonderful.
That we do.
We do.
I know.
Wonderful.
And you are always inspiring me. And Michael sent me a wonderful video this morning of Denzel Washington speaking on the subject of not just failure, but really wanting to do something in your life and to keep trying. And I'll tell you, Michael, when you send me things, sometimes it sparks thoughts in my head. And I was thinking about how Alan Watts, the writer, once said, you can't get wet from the word water, and how that is applied to what Denzel Washington was speaking about in the video, because there are so many people who are afraid to even put their toe in the water and get wet in regards to trying something new, whether it's a belief that they've had as a child that trying something new they're going to fail, and that word holds so much stigma attached to it, and I think it's all about putting forth the effort. Many years ago, I remember a group of individuals that were wanting me to go out and rock climb and just do the climbing wall and to try it out, and I thought, geez, I have no idea. What do you mean I have to put this harness around me and then you're going to tie a rope to me? I'm going to go up this wall and fall? I'm going to fall off the wall and actually practice falling off the wall and learning how to get back up and getting back up. And I don't have any arm strength. That's what I used to say. I don't have any arm strength. And then it just took one person to show me a few techniques that when you reach for something, don't use your arms to pull you up. Use your legs. And if you twist, you'll gain more inches to be able to reach up to that upper hold. And before you knew it, not only was I proficiently climbing at the climbing gym and falling off the wall many, many times, but I remember the first time that I actually did an overhang, that I had my feet wedged into these holes in my arms, and I'm thinking, oh my gosh, my arms they're just burning. I can't hold it. And then I just made one move, and then next thing you know, it was above the overhang. And I thought, oh my gosh, I did it. I did something that in my mind I believed I would never be able to achieve. And I went on to climb a 500 pitch climb in Colorado and in lots of different places all over the country. And it was a big difference from being in a climbing gym to actually being on a mountain and spending your whole day and then coming to where you thought there would be a belay rope to be able to get down the mountain and discover that it wasn't there and had to figure out some other way to get down. And I really want to thank you, because that video with Denzel really reminded me of that, that really when we open ourselves up to a possibility, that it does make things within ourselves. We discover things about ourselves that we never knew. So, I'd love to hear your thoughts on what it was that spoke to you. I mean, there were so many things that spoke to me, but I'd love to hear what was most impactful from that wonderful video on Denzel Washington about failure.
Well, I mean, thank you, and great story, by the way, about that. I still haven't climbed in a climbing wall yet. Not because I don't want to, but because I just haven't exposed myself to that experience. I have, however, from a young age, I think I did my first rappel down a 100 to 200 foot cliff when I was 11. I was 11 when that happened. And a word popped in my mind when you were talking about your climbing wall experience, and that is exhilarating. Not a word. It's funny. I used the word last week in describing something. And I said, I haven't used that word in a long time. Exhilarating. Exhilaration. We have have a tendency to slip into a groove.
Mm-hmm.
And when we're in that groove, we're not taking risks. We're not stretching outside of the little groove that we're in. We're in it. It's comfortable. It's like a well-worn shoe. Put it on, feels good. And what we have to do on occasion is get a different pair of shoes, get a new pair of shoes, put them on, and wear them in. We have to take a risk, get a different style, try something different, because as there were many takeaways from this video with Denzel, and I guess what we should do when we make the podcast, put the link in there to this video so that people can watch it themselves and really understand. It's a video of Denzel talking to a college graduating class 4 years ago, from the date that we're doing this particular show. So when you're looking at the takeaways from this, it was, he tells the story of his life and where he was and the risks he took, and it was about really. We've heard this before. Somebody else said it. Fail spectacularly. Go do something where you know there's a high degree of failure, and do it early, because and do it often. Do things that you aren't so assured of, so that when you fail or make a mistake or something happens that where you don't necessarily succeed, you develop the resilience to bounce back. That's really what you're working on, is resilience. That's the personal, the tool, the personal life tool that you really want to have more than anything else. And he says, I didn't become an Academy Award-winning actor or nominated actor. I think he might have won one, but I'm not quite certain. But from being turned down the first time walking away. I know because my brother's an actor. So in 1981, when he said, I'm going to go to L.A. and be an actor, he had my mother told him, look, I'll pay your rent for 2 years, then you're done. And it was amazing, because that's the way Mom was. That's the way Mom was. She says, I want you to realize your dream. You went to school, you got a degree in this, you have experience acting and all the behind the scenes and stage. You've got the bachelor arts degree. And he said he'd come back to Sacramento at that point where we lived, and he lived with us for like 2 years. And it's like, well, wait a minute here. Hold on a second. I want to be an actor. He said, I want to be an actor. It's only one place to be an actor. You got to go to Hollywood. Mm-hmm. You got to go there, and you got to dive in with both feet. And that's when she told him, okay, fine, I'll pay your rent for 2 years, and so you won't have to worry about whether or not you're going to have a place to stay for 2 years, and you can give it your best and biggest shot. Well, it didn't take him very long. I think it took him about 3, 4, 6 months or something like that, 7 months to get on his feet, get a job the first time out. He also went and got a job in he did serving work in a restaurant, that kind of thing, which most actors do. He sang guitar, he played guitar in various places, and got paid that way, and was a singing waiter in a French restaurant for a while. You do what you need to do, even though my brother never served anywhere in his life. All of a sudden he's serving in a restaurant. I'm going, whoa, okay. That's really kind of cool, and that's what a lot of people did, because it was night work. In the daytime, they were out hustling, right? They were out hustling. And people asked me, well, how come you didn't become an actor? And I said, just because, I had this guy. It's really to tell you a little story.
That wasn't your dream, right?
Yeah, well, it's interesting, because it's not a lot of people's dream. But I was on the Paramount lot. My brother was in Star Trek at the time, his first year in Star Trek, and we went down to visit Paramount Studios where they shot it. And so we went, onto the studio. We went to see him shoot a little bit, and then we went to the cafeteria. And the cafeteria is where everybody, all the extras and other people, go to eat. The food was awesome. The chefs are spectacular. and the food is inexpensive. So you're on the lot, and that's where you go to have lunch, right? So we went there, and my mother was with us, and my sister was with us as well. So we went to the cafeteria, and there was this big black guy. He came in, and he was having lunch, but he was sitting by himself. He said, "Why don't you come sit with us?" And he says, "Oh, yeah, okay, all right." So he came over. Turns out he was an L.A. cop, and he had the stature to be a heavy in the movies, right? Bodyguard, this, that, security guy. And so he said, yeah, I just started, I'm still a cop. I just take leave to go do, I get flown all over the world to do parts in movies. I said, what? He says,
wow.
Yeah. He says, you could be an actor. You've got great diction. You've got confidence. You could do what I'm doing. And I said, except for the fact that I'm not the hulking, walking muscular, appendage like you, I could. He says, yeah. He says, it's easy. You just have to have the confidence. And I'm going, that's fantastic. Not necessarily my thing. However, acting is the one. It's the one profession that I know of outside of. Even I think that I've heard of where you can literally turn people down for cause, whatever that cause may be. It doesn't matter if the producer or the casting director doesn't like them, even though they may be perfect for the role. They just that's it. If you're too tall, you're too short, your nose is too long, you're the wrong color, you're a woman, not a man. You're a man, not a woman. It's just, it could be anything. It's whatever cause, that's it, you're done. No, you're not going to get the role. And there's hundreds of people that are auditioning. So literally you have to develop a very thick skin. And this is what Denzel was saying, is that you get turned down, but you keep coming back. You keep coming back. Mm-hmm. You keep coming back. And he said, eventually somebody hired me. And then, the rest is history. Same thing with my brother. There's this old catch-22 that you can't get a job without an agent. You can't get an agent without a job. Mm-hmm. That's the catch-22 in Hollywood. You just can't go down there and just, go to a casting director. You have to have an agent. So you have to kind of do both simultaneously. Find an agent and then, go out for work. The agent doesn't sign you until they're sure that you can actually get some work because they don't want to waste a lot of time. And it's about basically putting yourself out there for personal rejection, and you got to keep going. You got to keep flowing. Got to keep moving. And something that Denzel has said within the context of this beautiful video is that you want to fail. He says, but fail forward. Know where you're falling when you fail. I thought it was kind of brilliant. That you want to you don't want to fail backwards. You want to fail forwards. you want to see yourself falling so that you can catch yourself and get back up. You don't want to fall backwards. You don't know where you're going. You also you want to keep moving forward. Keep moving forward. Mm-hmm. Never stop going forward. Even if it's one step in front of the other. You get turned down for something, you don't get a job, you don't get something that you really wanted, and instead of falling back into a state of pity, self-pity, or anger or depression of some particular kind, oh, woe is me, you fall forward where you go, okay, that didn't work, let's try it again. And let's do something different. Maybe I need to learn one thing. Maybe what can I learn? And sometimes what I know in interviews I've heard people say they've asked, why didn't you? They've maybe reconnected with the person who interviewed them and said, why didn't you give me the job? What was it about me? Which is a really bold move, quite frankly, to ask that question. I mean, you can't ask casting directors and others if you're an actor because they don't have the time for you and they don't want to be bothered. However, what you glean from the failure is in many cases more important than the failure itself. What you glean from it, that you can take and maybe improve on, and it could be some nuance. It could be something very simple. Maybe you didn't smile enough. Maybe you didn't have the right body posture that reflected confidence and the like. So it's really kind of interesting. However, I like to say, what can you do? What can you choose to do that's where you can take a risk? And this is the other thing that Denzel was pointing out, is that you have to take risks.
Absolutely.
In order to feel the exhilaration, which usually comes from success, you have to experience the failure to understand. It's a contrast. If you're always getting something and it's easy, then the exhilaration is muted because you've always had it. There's no contrast. You've never not had something. When you don't get something, when you have to build resilience, you understand the difference between the feelings that you have when you've failed and the feelings you have when you have success. You've got that contrast that you can look upon, and the exhilaration is higher. The degree of exhilaration is higher because you've been on the other side of the street, so to speak. And it's believing in yourself. It's taking risks. It's doing things where there's a high degree of failure. However, that there's something you will learn, and you'll get better at whatever it is, and make a plan for yourself of some kind. Have a plan of some kind that you can take forward. I say this because it's interesting, because Denzel and I discovered something when I listened to this, that we have a sort of a parallel in our lives, and that is that he said when he went to school, he tried pre-med, failed spectacularly. He says, I didn't fail. I failed spectacularly at pre-med. Then I tried pre-law. That didn't work out either. I tried something else. He says that didn't work out. And he says I was bouncing around all over the place. I had a 1.8 grade point average, and the dean came to me and he said, maybe you ought to take a break. Maybe you ought to take a break and figure out what you want to do with your life, because you're failing spectacularly at things that, one thing or another. And I said, that's interesting, because when I went to college back in 1976, I had no idea what I wanted to do with my life. I went. I was basically killing time for about 2.5 years, killing time until I finally left. But because I wasn't, in my view, we are asking young people to make decisions, long-term decisions about their lives, and we've talked about this before, way before they should, way before they have the mental capacity to make a decision about spending thousands of dollars to go to school for something that they discover they don't like, right? I have a nephew graduated from UCLA here this last June, and with a 4.1 grade point average. You want to talk about smart? It comes easy to him, and it came easy to his sister. 4.1 all throughout high school, 4.1 at 4 years at UCLA. Oh, my gosh. Valedictorian that. It's pretty amazing how easy it came for him. However, he did an interview for a position at a hospital because he thinks he wants to go to medical school. However, he doesn't know what he wants to do at medical school. So before he spends his money on medical school, which he's still studying for, by the way, to get into medical, to take the tests to get into medical school, he decided he wanted to go get a job at a hospital to shadow cardiologists, this or that, different doctors, to find out what life was really like for them, what their day was really like. And I said, that's just brilliant. That's brilliant. Instead of, because my sister said, we're going to spend a lot of money on going to med school for this kid, but he did it on his own. He went out and evidently he aced the interview so much that, so well that the gal who interviewed him said, I've never had an interview like you before. Never.
Wow.
He goes, really? He goes, yeah. She's absolutely, I've never had an interview go this well. And I'm just the stage one. There's another interview beyond that. I have to recommend somebody. I'm recommending you. So she's all recommending you.
Oh, that's great.
And I said, he's always been amazing, but he always takes risks, and that's what my sister instilled in him, is that you need to go out and put yourself out there and feel the feelings that you feel and work through them, because that's how you develop the resilience muscle that you have, and understand yourself and understand how to move past those feelings. Otherwise you're not going to do it. So a lot of people out there who may be listening to today's show on PRN FM, if you know someone, encourage them to go do anything and everything that comes to mind. It's just, it doesn't matter. You're never going to find out what you like until you try something. And and if you don't do well at it, at least you know that wasn't for me. However, you are going to still learn something along the way from someone on whatever it is. So that's those are the takeaways that I have from this.
Yeah, I so appreciate that, because when he said nothing in life is worthwhile unless you take the risk, I think when you fail or you fall forward, it was for him about growing and learning from that experience. And I chuckled when he said he had an audition for a Broadway. He's like, I would be perfect for this role. And then the person who was auditioning right before him, he said, sang like Pavarotti. And I've been in that situation where you see somebody do something and you're like, how the heck am I going to follow up? Like, or even in a class, and you go around and you introduce yourself, and then somebody has some spectacular things to say about their life, and then you're like, okay, and you're next, and you are, and then you go, where are you at that point? And
so
he went on to share that then he was paired up with this individual, and they had the lines, and he said it was something like, I'll give you this cup, and the person answered, I'll give you this cup, and projected it. And I just had to laugh, because how many times in life have we been in a situation, and then we are ourselves, we look at ourselves as less than, rather than seeing ourselves just as different. We offer something different, and that's okay. And I think that that's where we have to acknowledge that in those failures, what did you do right? What potential do you have? What things went wrong in his audition? He didn't really see it as a failure. He just found out that he wasn't particularly right for that particular part.
Yeah.
And I think that as you start to refine and look through that, but you do have to take a risk. And there was a story that I heard not that long ago about this individual. He was in a race, and he said at the end of the race there's always a free table. So for every runner that's in the race, there's bagels or T-shirts or whatever else. And he said what's so interesting is the people who at the end of the race will look at the line and go, no, I don't really want that. The line's too long. I don't want that because the line is too long. And I thought to myself, what an interesting metaphor for life. How many times do we sort of say, we don't wait for what it is that's offered to us? I mean, it's like, here's a gift from the universe, and you could take it, but no, you know what, I don't know. I have to do X, Y, Z to get through that door. I don't think so. I don't want to wait through that. But then they will later on, maybe a half hour later, they're at breakfast. Oh, you got a T-shirt. Well, that's a really nice T-shirt. But you know what? I didn't really want that T-shirt anyway.
Very interesting, isn't it? Very, very interesting. One of the more probably the phrase that he used that got me when he was standing in the wings listening to the guy who sounded like Pavarotti. the thing that stood out for me was he said, I felt myself getting smaller and smaller as I was standing there. And, I mean, how many times have you been in that situation? You just described it. I mean, that's what it is. You're sitting there you're feeling, oh, boy, this person's done all of that, and I'm just sitting here, just doing my thing. But you're right. Everybody is an individual. Maybe that particular person did what they were doing because they had opportunities to do it. Maybe you didn't have opportunities to do it. Not because, maybe you didn't have the opportunity to choose those things that they had done. Because everybody's life path is different. And we all blossom and we all learn. We all grow at a different pace, on a different scale, so to speak. So it's very interesting when I hear people. I mean, I have been there. I know you're sitting there listening to somebody rap off all this stuff, and I'm also cognizant that when I'm in a situation like that, when people say, tell us a little about you, I'm cognizant of everybody else in the room, and I basically just give something. I don't want to make anybody else feel less than, because I might have done, I had the opportunity to do more. So I'll just, a couple quick things. I do this. I do that. I don't need to glorify anything that I've done, and because it's still there. It's still in the memory banks. I have those experiences, and at some particular point in time, it may be the right time for me to say that. However, it's putting ourselves out there. I mean, I talked about several shows ago, going down 400 feet into the ground for, doing some spelunking and not understanding exactly what I'd signed up for. But I wanted to do it. And I do love rappelling, and I've done it many times since. And it's a great confidence builder. It's a great way to expose yourself to something different. You don't have to be a full-fledged, rappeller down from helicopters and all this kind of stuff. Do it for a living. However, it's fun, and it helps you understand it helps you grasp, I should say, how take the risk and actually succeed. It gives you that opportunity to do that. We all have to give ourselves opportunities to feel exhilaration. Not being adrenaline junkies, so to speak, but to feel the what it's like to be exhilarated. We have to do that, and when we do that, we have those feelings can bleed into other areas of our life and other experiences that we have. I tell this to people more than anything else, that success is something when you experience it, no matter what degree of success it is, it makes you feel awesome. And you can then, those feelings then bleed into other areas of your life. It's pretty amazing how it can help you build confidence in doing things that you haven't done before because you succeeded in something else that was completely different. I love it.
100%.
Yeah.
No.
Just
do. Picking yourself up again, after you fall, like he said, falling forward. And one of the things that I absolutely loved that he shared, and I didn't know because you shared it with me, that his mother owned a barbershop, but he had said, if you sit in the barbershop long enough, sooner or later you're going to get a haircut. And I thought,
I love that.
I love that. I really
so
did.
Many golden nuggets. That is definitely one of them.
For me it was.
That's true.
For me it was, because I have always been more of an optimist. My sister was more of a pessimist. My dad said if he filled up a room with horse manure and, he put me in there and then he put my sister in there, she'd be like, oh, Dad got us a horse, but it's gone. And me, I would look for the horse. I would be like, well, I definitely see that there's horse manure, so somewhere there's got to be a horse. And I would just
I like that.
Keep looking and looking and looking. And recently, as you know, Michael, I misplaced something that was very dear to me.
Yeah, that's right.
It was really very agonizing, and I reached out to many different people who I knew that were intuitive, and And one of them said to me, well, it's gone, and you know that sometimes things are only yours for a short time, and it has to go and be passed on to somebody else, and that your need for it came to an end. And I thought, well, thank you for that opinion, but no, I can't just let that go. At this point, I was not ready to accept that. I mean, and then I kind of got into this place where I was like, I just kept visualizing myself saying, I found it. And it's like going, I found it. And I kept rehearsing that. I found it. I found it. I found it. And sure enough, I had sort of just surrendered. I got on with some other things. I wasn't doing anything other than talking to a friend of mine on the phone. And without even thinking, I walked upstairs into my office and opened up this envelope and reached in, and there it was. And I said, I found it. And I was so grateful. And it was not that I couldn't have surrendered at the loss of it, but it was the meaning. It wasn't even the dollar value of it. It was just the meaning. And and it's so interesting because failure is a lot like that, because we lose bits and pieces of ourselves oftentimes when we perceivingly fail at something. But if we look at it as a growth experience, I mean, I think about when I had to run less than an 8-minute mile to make the track team, and just I was not a distance runner. I was a sprinter. I'm thinking, why do I have to do laps? Why do I have to do this? Why do I have to do that? And then it was like the exhilaration of tryouts and actually making the team, and then going off and doing things, and just really, I think, I ran hurdle. So sometimes when you ran hurdle, you would go the first hurdle every season was the hardest. You'd like run up to it and you'd stop, and then you go back, and then you'd run up to it, and then all of a sudden I'd lift my leg and I'd soar over a hurdle and I'd be fine. And I'd be like, oh, okay, now I've got X amount of hurdles left in front of me, and I would go through them. And sometimes, your foot would catch, and then you'd end up on the ground with cinders in your knee if you're on a cinder track or wherever it was. But I didn't stop. If I fell during a race, I got up. I always, unless it was something really agonizing, but I always wanted to finish the race, even if I didn't place. And I think that's what Denzel's saying in there, that you don't fail as long as you try. And
that's very true. That is absolutely true. Not failing. You're not failing as long as you keep going. As long as you keep making attempts, you're not failing. You're actually learning something. Even if the end result isn't what you expected, you've learned something that you can take into the next effort. And that's where I tell that to golfers all the time, especially those that are newbies out there, is that it's the 5 inches between your ears that's going to determine whether or not you can move forward in this game or not, because you're going to either talk yourself into it or talk yourself out of it, and that's going to be based on the way you feel about yourself as you're beginning, because in golf you will fail and you'll fail big time until you grasp the principles and the nuances and all the other physicalities that are involved in the game. And I tell you this, I guess I've wrote a podcast I haven't produced yet, and I used an example of something about in terms of belief. A girlfriend who plays, she plays better than the average female golfer in the country, who shoots probably a 10 or 12 stroke more average than she does. She's been playing a long time. She's played long enough to have great luck. And twice in the last 2 weeks, she's put the little white ball in a 4-inch hole from off the green some 40 yards away. And I'm like, wow. Wait a minute. And I'm like, not once, but twice. Now, honestly,
great.
I can't tell you the last time I did that. Now, my score is spectacular, but I haven't done that in a while. So it's interesting how you as I like to say, golf, like life, is full of miracles when you believe that they're possible, when you don't hold yourself back, when you don't prevent yourself from believing in that something is possible. Something better than can occur, can come out of that. And that's one of the little things that about life that in a way that it mirrors golf or in many other games, but golf has so many nuances to it where if you think you can do something, it actually manifests almost instantaneously. It is pretty amazing how that can be the case. And you're like, wow, if you wanted to do that in life, it would take a while. It'd take certain things lining up, planets, stars, sun's got to be in the right place, moon's got to be in the right place, the circumference of the earth has to be in the right spot, I got to be in the right geographical location, latitude, longitude to make that happen. But out there it's like, simple. You get the miracle because you simply believe, and your body goes, oh, okay, fine. He believes he can do this. Let's do this. Let's make this happen. And you can talk yourself into doing miraculous things. And in life, you can do the same. You can do the same thing. You can talk yourself into doing miraculous things, into things happening, because you never know what situation that you're going to be in. So when you're positive and you're loving, when you're kind, when you're loving to yourself and kind to yourself, don't beat yourself up, and you love life, regardless of what's going on in life, you keep the door open. You keep so that miracles can kind of slip in for you. And instead of the opposite, which is maintaining an attitude that is based on the past, on something that didn't work out, and carrying that forward into your next effort. And that's one of the things that I keep talking about golf incessantly, but it's so immediate that if you didn't do well, if you don't get rid of that feeling, those thoughts, if you don't shake that off and let it go, and adopt a great attitude, just forget all about it and move forward, then you will carry that angst, that tightness, that energy that you have. Everything will go into the next effort, and the next effort will be, in many cases, just as bad, because it's influenced, it's being driven, it's by the energy of the last effort that didn't go so well, the mindset, the physicality, everything. You just draw that negative into the next moment, and it's immediately just as bad as the other, because that's what you brought into it. And I tell people, in life too. Okay, so that didn't work out. Didn't work out. The relationship didn't work out. The job didn't work out. The boss you have now is not what you thought they were going to be. I mean, whatever it may be, it's the mindset that you actually have. It's how you process that and are able to let it go and begin anew. It's how quickly you can do that. That's going to determine how the next effort is going to be, how it's going to unfold. He did, by the way, give the Edison inventing the light bulb analogy, which is really awesome, that particular story. And I've heard it said different ways. I've heard it said that he tried 10,000 times to make a light bulb. I've heard it 1,000 times. It doesn't really matter. The point is, he never stopped trying to make a light bulb and never said he couldn't make a light bulb. Is that interesting?
Right.
Now, here's a little something I learned this week. Didn't know this. Edison developed a light bulb, but a black inventor invented the filament that allowed the light bulb to burn for hours and days and weeks and months and years. You know that?
That's amazing. No, I did not know that.
A black inventor invented that. Yeah, just basically their contribution was an improvement on what Edison had created. It, in and of itself, he was able to create the light bulb, but not the longevity of the light bulb, which is, and I'm like, wow, it's the things that you learn. And I have a book here about inventors, and I got to look to see if it's black inventors, and I've got to see if it's in there. I say that it could have been a Asian inventor or an Indian inventor or somebody else. It really, the point is that we can derive from examples that are out there. We need to see. It's good to see somebody like you who's done something really, really valuable and really important, which is why I like Denzel going out. He talks to colleges, historic black colleges. He speaks to boys and girls clubs around the country. He goes around the world speaking to various people. He's a well-known personality, but he's also an African American. So his goal is to go out to African American communities and help people understand. Look, this is the way life works, and this is how you can be successful.
Right.
And it's what's going on in your head, that 5 inches between your ears, that determines pretty much where you go and how you get there.
Yeah, and I think a lot of times, when you mentioned to me that he did not grow up in the most affluent of circumstances. Sometimes people forget where individuals come from. They see, wow, he's got all of these accolades, he's an Oscar winner, all of these different things, but they forget where they came from that barber chair, sitting in there cleaning the floors, helping his mother. And we've talked about her before, Sarah Blakely. She's a billionaire entrepreneur. And when she would come home, her dad would say after school, like, what did you fail at today? And he would always applaud them for trying. Go try something else, see what that works. And so, when she started her business at age 27 with $5,000 from her personal savings, and basically she just didn't like the way she looked in white pants. So she cut the feet off of her pantyhose and she started wearing them. And she's like, maybe there's something here. And she had no idea. She was a fax salesman. She sold fax machines. She knew nothing about women's undergarments or the fashion industry or even how she was going to go about doing it. And she basically, when she had her prototype done, and she didn't tell anybody for a whole year what she was doing because she didn't want anybody to say, that's a stupid idea. You're never going to get that off the ground. Why are you even trying? And so when she finally figured out how to get a prototype made, and she didn't know how to do a sales call to one of these big department stores, she just kind of grabbed the woman and said, I've got something to show you. And she took her into the dressing room, and the woman's like, wow, I never saw that before. And, she ended up being sold in exclusive stores. I think the first year revenue was close to $4 million. And, she was very, very, it's very interesting, but she just always used to say, don't be intimidated by what you don't know. That can be your greatest strength and ensure things that you do differently from everybody else. And I appreciate that, and like Denzel, be willing to make mistakes because that will propel you to where you want to be. And I think Denzel mentioned something, and I'm not a baseball person. Who is the baseball player that he mentioned?
Oh, it's I'm sorry, Reggie Jackson.
Reggie Jackson,
right. one of the all-time home run hitters.
Right, but he said wasn't he one of the biggest strikeouts?
Right.
But nobody remembers the
strikeouts in his career. Yeah, he had the biggest number of strikeouts than anybody else, but he also had he was, from a record book perspective, I mean, he had the highest number of home runs hit, and it's a great stat. It's also
it's a great metaphor for life, though.
Exactly.
Really?
Exactly. It's interesting. I want to take a step back here because you were talking about Sarah Blakely. That the reason that she knew this innately. it's interesting how this happens. The human mind is highly susceptible to suggestion. Mm-hmm. And when you have a dream, when you have a goal, something that you're working towards, you have to keep it to yourself. You really need to keep it to yourself because it's your energy and thought that's going into whatever, and effort that's going into making it happen. And we don't know necessarily why other people need to rain on your parade. Maybe it's jealousy. Maybe it's they never took the risk that you took. Maybe they did and they failed and they never went back and tried again. Maybe that was the end of it for them. However, the unique thing about it is that is the reason that I was given when I was doing some research, and I forgot who the gentleman was. Dr. Joseph Murphy had it in one of his books from the early 1900s that the human mind, don't tell anybody what you're doing because your mind is susceptible to suggestion. And the other comment out of it is if you don't have anything positive to say, don't say anything at all. That's the other thing that my mother said, I'm sure, and maybe yours did, others did as well.
Oh yes, absolutely. Don't have anything nice to say. Don't say anything at all.
And you're like, yeah, all right, fantastic. But that's as a parent, this is the first thing that needs to go into a parenting book. Is encouraging your kids to fall, encouraging your kids to fail. You're on the right track when someone's on the right track when you see this mark under their chin where they fell as a kid, right? How many kids have you seen with a mark on their chin? Fell down and split your chin open, right? And so you have a scar there. It's like it's a scar of honor, man. You did something. You took a risk and it didn't work out, and that's your scar for life. And unfortunately, I encounter a lot of parents nowadays that don't want their kids to be in a position. They want to child-proof everything so that can't possibly happen. And bending over backwards to do so. And I can't remember any house that we ever lived in, every 2 years we moved, that my mother ever used that kind of mindset. Oh, is this something that, can my kid fall off that balcony from the third floor? Who cares? They got to be smart enough not to fall off the balcony. I'll tell them not to fall off the balcony. They should know, it's possible.
She empowered you with critical thinking, right?
Exactly. Yeah. Although you're doing it, it's better to do that than to go ahead and child-proof an area so that you're severely limiting the possibility of what could happen. And is it safe? Is it safe? I don't know. There's no place that's absolutely safe. You can't. It's not possible. Actually, they can't. It's not possible, really, to go and look at every possible avenue from which there could be a problem. There could be an issue. However, the antithesis, which is teaching reasoning, teaching critical thinking, that's important. That's valuable. Look at this thing. You're 3 feet tall. This thing is 4 feet tall. Can you climb that extra foot and fall down 100 feet? Yeah, that's possible. However, would it be in your best interest to do so? No. You wouldn't be around for me to love you anymore. It's pretty interesting. This kind of thinking is applied in a lot of different ways. There's a lot of things going on, but the human mind is susceptible to suggestion, and Sarah Blakely was very right to stay focused on what she was doing because she's a billionaire now. But she's also a wonderful person.
Yeah, I think she is a wonderful person too. A mother and just giving back and
exactly.
just
very grateful.
Yeah, and I think she's just very humble. I did her master class and loved it. I took it 3 times because there were so many powerful takeaways in there for me. do I want to start an undergarment company? No, but there are things in there that I really appreciated.
Mm-hmm. Absolutely.
And, and
there's
encouraging it. And I go ahead. Yeah, I mean, and I think one of the things is too is not to be afraid of change, because she started with that business, and then there were certainly other individuals that came out with similar products, and then she said, okay, well, we still have this and we still have that, and she's constantly looking for other things, just like Denzel. His first, I don't know what his very first job he got hired at. He didn't speak about that, but you think about that as again another metaphor for life. Like, he would have been in this role, and then he was on this role, and then as later on in life he was in Fences, and he was back in that same theater where he had that audition where he failed. And he was.
I saw the Fences movie. It's actually quite moving. He did a movie of it with Viola Davis.
Okay.
She was in the play, but they turned the play into a movie called Fences, and I believe it was on Netflix.
Okay.
Netflix or Amazon or Apple. It might have been on Apple, but Apple TV. But the movie is quite moving, and it is there's so much to take away from that particular movie, and the ending is wonderful. The ending is absolutely. It's very uplifting. You're going to cry at the ending. I mean, it's just it's not because, I mean, it's got. I'm not going to ruin it. I'm not going to spoil it, but it is a fabulous. It's a fabulous ending. It is. It's exactly what you would hope for, and it comes out of nowhere because it has nothing to do with Viola Davis or he. It's very interesting the way that it ends, and you just have to see the movie and work through the plot and the story and everything that's part of it. There's forgiveness in it. There's a lot of different things that are part of the movie that are it's just like life. You have to be willing to practice Ho'oponopono, baby, all the time. You got to practice.
Right.
And here's the other thing. We talk about failure and falling forward. But I don't know if we talk enough about the fact that personal forgiveness is the tool you use to move forward. It's one of them. One of the main ones that you have to, when you fail, you have to forgive yourself for the failing, for whatever happened that led to the failure, so that you can shed it, let it go, and move on. Try it again if you must. Again, the Reggie Jackson hitting a home run is awesome. However, you're going to rack up it. In order to be the home run king or queen, you have to have strikeouts. One cannot happen without the other.
Well, it's so true, Michael. Absolutely. Yeah, not taking the safe route and taking the walk. And it's that same thing. You're gonna wait in line for that free T-shirt and be persistent and get what you want, where your vision is, or you're gonna just let it pass you by because you don't want to make the effort. And he did. He would swing that bat, and swing that bat, and swing that bat, and swing that bat, and eventually it cracked. And that ball sailed, and the rest is history.
Yeah, absolutely. It's a when you're in business, you're going to get you're going to get a lot of no's, and if you're selling something, you're going to get a whole lot of no's. However, the reasoning behind the no can be multi-layered, and there's always something to learn from the no. Most of it, and for anybody who's an entrepreneur out there, if you do get a no, it's always good to ask, why didn't you buy my product? What was it about my product that didn't resonate with you? So that you can learn from it, so that the next time you're pitching the product to somebody, you can have that in mind. Sometimes it's a function of the way that you yourself pitched the product, the way that you brought it up to that person. Maybe that person just wasn't right for it, and you didn't figure that out early enough. You know, if you've got a house and you're trying to sell somebody a house, they already have a house. It's going to be a lot more challenging to sell a house to somebody who's already got one than to somebody who doesn't. Mm-hmm. That's just the way it goes. Yeah. And maybe that was the reason why. I mean, there's all kinds of reasoning, but there's doing a, oh my gosh, what was it? Forensic. The word forensics came to me from dealing with something else. Sort of a forensic take on why you failed is always a very good thing. I do it in golf all the time. Why did that shot go right? What did I do? You know, why did that thing happen the way it was? What was it about me? What was my mindset at the time? And I go, okay, got to shake that mindset. Next time I do this, and I've got to be more fluid, and I practice this thing and practice it, and you know the next one will go better, because I kind of did a very quick forensics of what happened, forensic process, and that is pretty amazing. Now, there's one other word that I heard, term I heard this week from Ken Burns, the Academy Award-winning documentarian, film document. You know who Ken Burns is, right? Ken Burns. So. Ken Burns. He does all the documentaries on PBS. He's done documentaries about everybody, Lincoln, and I mean, you name it, everybody. And Ken is he does like the documentaries on the Civil War, and he does the documentaries on events that have emotional consequence. He delves into the emotional aspects of things, not just facts of, you know, this happened, that happened, and here's where it was, and there's where it wasn't. He gets into the mindset behind the people, the emotional. He called it emotional archaeology. It was like, I'm like blown away by this term, emotional archaeology. What was the mindset behind some of the biggest events in America, and you know, the people behind them? He didn't want to know. He wanted to know. It's like, why did Truman? You know, what was his mindset? What was his thinking? And by going back and looking at papers and things around from that people wrote back in the day, when people wrote documents and papers and kept those things, right? You go back and research what was the emotional archaeology. I thought it was a fabulous. I'd never heard that term before. I think I'm going to be using it a lot because it's what we have to do with ourselves. In my view, that's what we need to do.
Yeah. No.
Think about why we do things.
And ask yourself, too, when you fail, what did you do right?
Right.
You know, yes, you failed, but what were the things that you did right in that whole process?
That's part of
it. It may not be the outcome that you wanted, but and I'm sure that as you're golfing with Sandy, and you guys are such a great team, that you're cheering her on and going, "Wow, you did that once. Now you've done it twice." You know, and you're even asking yourself, "Well, I haven't been able to do that." But you're not feeling badly that you haven't been able to do that, because you do things equally well.
That's good. You know, it's your own. You're responsible for your own outcomes. That's the wonderful thing I love about the game. It's not a team sport. You're responsible for your own outcomes, and as a result of that, the responsibility, the accountability is on you. And a lot of times people quit the game because they can't deal with that fact. They can't deal with the fact that they failed, and there's nothing to blame it on, no one to blame it on. And it's one of the frustrating things about golf that makes people quit the game at a very high rate, and because it's taken personally. And it's not like pickleball. Pickleball, you've got a partner, you can get a different partner. You can get a partner that's better than you. You know, I mean, heck, you can try all kinds of things. You can do the thing. You can get better, more easily by playing up against a wall, like you could do with a tennis ball and a tennis racket. Practice hitting shots up against. You can do that kind of thing, but ultimately, if it's a two-person game, then you're partnered up with somebody, and you have to rely on them. You have to depend on them. You have to believe in them, just like you believe in yourself. And golf is not like that. It's you, and I guess it'd be like playing a tennis match against someone, where it's all on you, and there's nobody.
Or rock climbing, right?
Yeah, or rock climbing. These single
nobody getting me up there.
Yep.
For me,
nobody's getting you up to the top of that.
Nope. And once you're at a certain point on the mountain, you got to keep going, keep moving forward. And Walt Disney used to always say that: keep moving forward, keep moving forward. There were so many things. I look back at the animatronics when he opened up the parks and his vision and where different things growing up. It just he was a pioneer and a visionary and wanting to create. Mm-hmm. Yeah. I mean, if you think about how long ago that was. Yeah.
Yeah.
Really. And those robotics are still okay.
Yeah, it was the 1960s when he did Disneyland. I know I went to Walt Disney World in 1973, which was 1 year after it opened, for the first time. And the interesting, you're so right. Everything you said is so amazing. There's something to be learned from people that accomplished big things, and it was the collective, the teachers. From Carol Collins was channeling that said, think big. You have to think big. Mm-hmm. It's not about lack. It's about abundance. It's about think as big as you can. It's not about going to Texas. It's about going to the moon. That's how big you have to go. I'm going to the moon. You may not get to the moon. You may get to Texas. You may get to the other side of the world, but you have to think along the lines of something bigger. There are, as she said, which is really interesting, 8+ billion people in the world. Why am I only trying to get 10,000?
Yeah,
8 billion people. Well, yeah, it's true. She says, that's the mistake that we actually make, is thinking that, you're saying, oh, I'd love it if I could make $5,000 a month, and I'm going, $5,000 a month? Why are you saying? Where'd that number come from? Why not $100,000 a month? You may not get to $100,000. However, your mind will expound upon that number of $100,000. It's like taking yourself to a whole different place when it comes to thinking. It comes to thinking, and that's why. A
place where everything is possible.
Right. Exactly. That's fail big. Fail big. The biggest failure you can. The biggest failure you possibly can. I know people who've gone bankrupt and come back and become multimillionaires, lose it all, and come back. Mm-hmm. They don't wallow in the failure. There's no pity. They're not embarrassed by it. It's just, hey, that happened. I did this. I learned this. I'm going to move on, and I'll build something else that I'm passionate about. I'll discover a new passion, and I'll go back and do it again. And then people who built a business, sold a business, went back and after a few years and were bored and decided to go back and build a new business, the same business but in a different way or in a different place. Mm-hmm. They knew how to do it. Yeah. So all kinds of things can happen. But like I said, fail big. Think about that.
Yeah. It's a great way to close out the show. Any last words for our listeners? And I want to thank everybody for making the time to connect with us here on PRN FM on Connect to Love. It's a joy and a blessing, and I'm so grateful for each and every one of you. And Michael, especially, thank you for this beautiful topic, because I can't wait to go out and fail big at the next big thing that I'm undertaking.
I would say to our audience, think about what it is that you're doing. Think about the dreams that you have for yourself, and make a plan to at least move in that direction. Get out of your comfort zone, because you're not going to be where you want to be unless you are willing to take a risk to move in that direction. It's not going to happen, because you're the one who has to make it happen. So think big and fail big to learn. Thanks.
Wonderful. Thank you.
Wonderful week. Until next time. Thank you.